Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is brought to you by Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery community, a thriving network of individuals who are fighting back against the stigma of addiction and recovery. Join your hosts,
the Podfather, Jersey Ed,
Miss Meg,
as they break the silence and speak up about the real issues of addiction, treatment, and recovery. Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your Friends in Recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Friends in Recovery Podcast.com. I am the Podfather, Mike Miles, and I'm here with...
Miss Meg. What's up, guys? What's up, Podfather?
What's up with you? You're looking good. Who's that guy over your left shoulder?
Jersey Ed. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
I miss you guys.
We miss you. We miss you.
I know. And
the lovely lady... The lovely
Okay.
lady to my right is my daughter, Michelle Beecher. How are you, Michelle?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
Hey, Michelle.
Hey.
We have a guest today. Hi,
Yes, we
Michelle.
do.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Michelle made the
Good,
trek
good.
to Sweet Studio, and
Nice.
she saw the
Nice.
flashing lights outside and
The recording lights?
the recording lights,
Yeah.
yep, and the big arrow,
And I
Sweet
knew to
Studio.
take a left.
Yep, she knew where to go.
I would have ran if I were you, Michelle.
Those lights cost a
think
lot of
it's
money
really
to keep
bad.
on.
Big. I was gonna say, look, I felt like I was in Vegas.
Yeah, really big neon lights. They're expensive.
And for you that aren't here today, Sweets is he's got on hot pants, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
With closed toe sandals.
Yes.
Where do you get those closed toes?
Well, they're like clogs. You know what I mean? They're more like a clog. It's
Clog,
a wooden
if you
base.
will.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
wooden base.
with the rubber sole. Yeah,
Yep.
they look good.
Sweets, I was laying
hiking
laying
clogs.
in bed last night thinking of you, Sweets.
That's weird.
Oh, gee.
This
Can I-
just took a turn.
Can I suggest you stop doing that? Could I get you to stop doing that? I guess is the
Well,
question.
it depends. But anyways, I'm like, well, when are we gonna have this contest? When is this gonna be done? When are we gonna? When are you gonna pick a winner? Because you have hundreds of people that sent in pictures. Do you
Well,
have
that's
a
what's
winner
taken.
yet?
That's what's taken so long. Is just it's
okay.
the time. I mean, I have to critique each one
That's
of them
right.
and write a little summary of what I think
No.
is good and bad. I mean, it's
That's right.
exhausting.
Methodically
It
going
is,
through
it is.
each one, you know?
Is that what you do that day and night, don't you?
Well, I mean, it's this, and then I do that, and that's it.
Well, guys, if you think we're bullshitting, I'm going to give you a phone number to call and get a hold of us. I always forget to give out the phone number, but our phone number is 617-379-1163, and leave us a message. And you'll hear Miss Meg's beautiful voice on there telling you to leave a message and how to leave a message and all that good stuff. So
Super. Good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
That is good
absolutely. It is,
stuff.
yeah.
We're getting all
So-
kinds of drawings.
So what is everybody doing in this pandemic? Like, we know Sweets is like probably out shopping online, buying new clothes for the studio for
Well,
himself. And
He's got a
you
new
know,
light in here today.
I heard a new
Beautiful,
light
yeah.
and Miss Meg, you're crashing into things and Podfather's not smoking cigars. This is like way too weird for me today. So.
And Michelle's working 1 week on, 3 weeks
Yes.
off. How's that?
Yeah, that's not
Wow.
great. Yeah, it's not fun. I miss working.
That's a good
yeah.
job. That's a
Yeah,
good job.
Yeah, I'd rather be at
So-
work.
I know. It's different trying to get all this together. But so what's everybody doing? Sweets, what are you doing? What's anything different in the studio? Anything different in your life? What's going on in the pandemic? Just to kind of talk to everybody about this.
So I've heard a lot of. I've seen a lot of memes. Everybody knows what a meme is, right?
Yes.
About the what people are accomplishing, and that you're either gonna use this time to improve yourself, learn a new skill, develop something, or it's gonna break you down. And so I'm trying to be the former. I'm trying to learn new things, develop new things, and I would like to come out of my quarantine better than I went in.
Nice.
I can't promise that. I'm just saying I would like that. So I'm doing my best.
I like that. I want to come out of my quarantine better than when I came in. That's a good goal. That's a really good. Somebody's just screaming outside my house. Sorry, guys. I'm in my makeshift studio here. I hung a sheet up today so you don't see all the crap in the back. And,
Yeah.
but somebody yelled outside my window. I don't know what they're doing.
What kind of
so.
stain is that on that sheet right there?
It's called
weird.
bleach.
It's weird. Yeah.
And it is a sheet. Look, see.
Yeah.
It's all back
There
there.
it is.
Oh man,
The
never,
bike,
never show them what's behind the
the
curtain.
Beatles sign, everything. You got it all
Yep.
back there.
I know. And how about everybody's sobriety and everybody's mental health? How's all that going? Are you guys all good?
Yeah, I'm still working. I still have 2 sessions a night, 2 sessions a week, Monday and Tuesday night up at Crossroads in Salem. We have group
Wait,
group
hold on. Are they
therapy.
paying for that spot?
Not yet. But so we have people that still come. We wear masks, and we have about 6 to 8, and we have a big room. We space the chairs apart, and then we have a step meeting, an AA step meeting on Tuesday night, 5:30 to 6:30, and same deal. We we sit quite a ways away from each other, read a step. This past Tuesday was step 2. And yeah, it's good. We have some good sobriety going on. We have people that have 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 11 months, 13 months, 1 year, 9
Good.
months. Yeah, we have some good people that are just coming all the time. And we gave them the option of either doing Zoom or coming. And we decided to keep everything sterilized as best we can. And nobody's gotten sick yet. Good sobriety, though. That's what I want to say.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
are maintaining.
That's great. That's great too that everyone's still showing up in person. You guys are able to accommodate, the social distancing and the masks and everything, because I think that's another piece. Like
Yep.
just for me, Ed, when you said like what's everyone's mental health like right now, I'm like totally burnt out. I'm finding that it's like overwhelming to think about opening emails, and I think I've sort of gotten into a little bit of a cocoon, and I like it, and it's hard, I think, to stay connected. And
Great point.
I don't know, I'm hearing that from a lot of people too, so it's nice to hear you guys still doing the
Right.
meetings in person.
Yeah.
Right. But that's
What
a
we're
good.
doing. Go get
No, I was going to say that's a good point, because I wake up every morning and I have, like, whether I wake up at 5:30 or 5, I have emails and text, and I don't even want to look at them. So I made it a rule now. I don't look at them until 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then, I don't want to start my day off taking a shower, worrying about some paperwork I have to do, or somebody needs something, or someone's in a crisis. And I had a few crises as well, which are really tough right now, as Ed knows, because I called Ed on one of the crises.
Mhm.
But anyway, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's
How
tough.
about you,
Well,
Michelle?
Yeah,
How's it going with you?
it's good. I just trying to keep Holly, my daughter, with school and all the emails, and I've become her personal assistant. So
Yes.
I have to tell her when her snack break is and she's a sophomore. So it's, I don't know any of the subjects she's learning the way they teach, because so I'm like, I can't do it for you. Just do the best you can.
Yeah.
And
Don't
she
worry,
does.
I have a senior here, and we have to do the same thing. So it's time to eat, time to
Yep.
go to lay down. I'm like, Jesus God. So
It's
it's crazy. So
my son's in college and he's doing fine. So that's good. He's really
good.
rolling with
Good.
it.
Wow,
He is.
Podfather has some older
He is.
grandkids.
Yeah.
You are an old guy.
Yeah, I have a young daughter and older grandchildren. That's right.
So a couple of things that are going on. I do want to talk about and some Zoom stuff that Genesis House is doing. We've been doing two Zoom meetings a day. For everybody who's out there who's trying to think of something to do, get into a meeting. We're doing 2 Zoom meetings a day, noon and 7 p.m. every single day. And we also have an alumni meeting now. We just started on Tuesday at 8:15 p.m. And we get people from all over the country on these meetings. It's amazing. Everybody's coming in and talking about the problems. It's not a traditional AA meeting or the 12-step meeting, but we got to accommodate everybody. Nowadays, Meg, you taught me this, and I know that traditional AA people don't want to fucking hear it. But it's okay. It's okay, because we all have our own program. I work the AA program, but you taught me, Meg, that recovery looks different, and it's okay. It's okay as long as we're on the right track, as long as we're doing what we're doing. And I think it's great, and some of these people storm off the meeting, or they don't want to be on the meeting because it's not a traditional AA meeting. But you know what? For every one person that's storming off, we have 15, 20, 25 people that we're helping. So, and that's how we have to look at it. So, but Monday through every day, every 7 days a week, Genesis House has a Zoom meeting at 12 noon and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we love for whoever's listening to join us. And you can go to our Facebook page, Friends in Recovery Podcast, and register there. So Podfather's been on it a few times, and he shared his story one time with us. So I just wanted to give a plug for that.
I think it's important to know that I think a lot of old traditional AA people, the big book talks about the media, and I know this is media, but I don't think they were referring to this type of media. I don't think they took in mind there might be a epidemic going on, or there might be some real serious, consequences of meetings. So
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a traditional meeting, but also people
Yes.
can, as you know, people can bomb in on the meeting and that uninvited, that have no interest in recovery, that just want to, be practical jokers. So I can understand both sides of it. I've talked to people from both sides. I think that should be mentioned.
I think the traditions were written at a time totally different than ours,
100%.
which means that we have to make adjustments. I mean, if media like this existed back then, I imagine it would have been encouraged
probably
to connect, because if I'm not mistaken, that is the whole purpose for the 12 steps is connection, reconnecting to your own spiritual self, humanity, and the fellowship in whatever way you can do it. But like the idea of anonymity, I was just on a podcast recently. It's a high cost of anonymity, is that too many people take that part so seriously and so literally, which is good for protection, but it eliminates the idea of inspiring other people by sharing your stories publicly, and getting out there and showing people that it works and you can get well. And so I love that Zoom brings that to the table. You can hop on a meeting with 150 people, you know what I mean, and just sit quietly with your screen off and listen to hope and become inspired.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
And we've been noticing too on these meetings, that we've been that people come on and they don't turn their microphones or their cameras on, but maybe they need that, maybe they need to, like, how many times, and I know in early recovery, I would walk into a meeting and not feel comfortable there, or not want to show my face, especially very early recovery, when you're feeling not good, you're feeling bad about yourself. So this is a great way to dip your toe in the water,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
And I know we have a guest here. Michelle, sorry, we do our little banter back and forth, and but we'll get to you in a minute. And I promise, I do want to find out a lot about you, because you did grow up in a household with this gentleman here, and I use that term loosely. I'm just kidding. I love you, Podfather. But we're we just like to touch base with our folks and everything. So. Mike, do you want to tell us about your daughter and kind of why she's with us, and we'll go right into the interview from here?
Sure, absolutely. We've been doing this for a little over 2 years. When I say this, I'm talking about podcast. Ed and I started doing podcast just about recovery, and we're both recovering, so we thought that would be a good idea. His work, his type of work, my type of work. I was the EAP for the Lowell Police Department for many years, and Ed obviously works for Genesis House, and we both have a lot in common, especially when it comes to recovery and family. I think it's I feel very fortunate. I've been doing counseling as a clinical social worker and a licensed alcohol drug counselor for 20 years. And I've worked exclusively with young adult men, young teenage and adult men. Not so much young teenage, but I've worked with the younger population. But in the last 12 years, I've been working mostly with 18 and above. Males and females, but mostly males. And I have a grandson who's 18, Michelle's daughter, Brandon. And I have a granddaughter, Holly, who's 16. And Michelle is my oldest daughter. And I have a son, Christopher, and I have a daughter, Cara, 33 and 26. So I think from my perspective, from what I've seen, and I've talked to Michelle about this, and before I ask her to tell us a little bit about herself and everything, my grandchildren, not because they're my grandchildren, keep that in mind. It's just they are so healthy mentally, emotionally, physically. Now, Michelle might disagree a little bit with because she's raising them and I don't see them as much. But I'm talking about substance use and abuse and how there's none. And to me, that is, and these are very popular, trendy, cheeky children. These are great kids. You love them. You meet them. They're very attractive and they're just wonderful. Manners beyond. And she's done it basically by herself. And I just think it's amazing. So, Michelle, tell us about yourself.
What do you want me to say?
Hey, guys, real quick before you get into that, let's take a quick break so we can just continue this interview instead of getting into everything. So let's take this break and Podfather, back to you in the studio.
Okay, Friends in Recovery podcast. We'll be right back.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. At Genesis House, they focus on treating the underlying causes of addiction. Their comprehensive approach includes psychiatric care, individual and small group therapy, trauma healing techniques, and holistic care including yoga, massage, and animal-assisted therapy. After treatment, their clients enjoy the lifelong support of a nationwide network of Genesis House alumni. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery. Welcome back to the Friends in Recovery Addiction Recovery Podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, Genesis House, for supporting this show, along with individuals in recovery and the people that love them. Friends in Recovery Community of Support holds events across the country sponsored by Genesis House in Palm Springs, Florida, Marlton, New Jersey, Newtown, Connecticut, and Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. The Friends in Recovery Addiction Recovery Podcast is powered by your likes, follows, subscribes, and shares. And please be sure to do us a favor and leave us a 5-star review. And now here are your Friends in Recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Friends Recovery Podcast. I am the Podfather, Mike Miles.
What's up, guys? I'm Miss Meg.
Hey, everybody. Jersey Ed in his quarantine studio here in Pennsylvania.
Nice.
Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you. Hey, welcome. Michelle, welcome. It's my daughter, Michelle Beecher, and you were kind enough to come here today and risk your life getting through all this quarantine.
Yeah,
So, Doc, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Michelle. I'm Mike's oldest daughter. I work for the Mass Trial Courts, and I have a son who will be 19 in August, and my daughter is turning 17 in October. So.
And basically, you've been a single mom for quite a while.
11 years.
11 years. And you've raised 2 children, and not because they're my grandchildren, mind you, but these kids are, they're very successful, loving, knowledgeable, personable children that don't abuse substances.
Yeah, they're good kids. I mean, I think that I'm very much invasive in their life, and I always have been. Like, how do I say, like, go into my son's room, I've looked for things when I felt a little, what's going on, and kind of felt like he was, and basically I was disappointed and happy at the same time. So we won't say what I found, because it had nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. So we'll just leave it at that. But again, he was almost 18 at the time. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
He had asked me to go in. He went to go get a new screen protector for his phone, and he left the receipt in the case in a Verizon bag under his bed. He's like, can you go in my room and go in my bag under my bed? And he has like shoe boxes and stuff. And I just go in there. I'm like, oh God, like what's going to happen? So I look, and there's condoms in there. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I found your receipt. And I sent him a picture of it, and he goes, oh God, sorry. And I said, at least someone's getting some. And he's like, Mom, don't ever say that again. I was like, well, just try to
I think the proper response when your teenage boy says, hey, can you go in my room and get something, is no.
I know.
I think you should go get it yourself.
Yeah,
Definitely not under your bed. Thanks anyway.
Yeah, Sweet has a few boys, I think. Right?
I do. Yeah, my son's asked me to go in his room. I'm like, I'm not interested, man. If you go grab my backpack, nope, you can get it.
Nope.
No, you're a full grown man. You can get your own stuff.
God.
Yeah.
So it must be tough being, right now with the quarantine. I know you kind of referenced it earlier, like the personal assistant, right?
Yes,
Ugh.
to my daughter. And my daughter's still working. She has a part-time job, and because we live in New Hampshire, so she works at Aroma Joe's. It's a coffee shop, and she's still working like 2 or 3 shifts a week. And so, which I think is great, because it gives her something that she has to go do, and I'm happy about it. School is a little difficult online for her because she needs that visual, like, direction and stuff. So I'm trying to give her that.
What about Michelle, what about drugs and alcohol? Have you guys had that conversation many times?
Yes.
I'm sure you have.
So, I mean, I guess it started with when Brandon started to hang around with older kids, a little bit older than himself. And he's a little bit more naive, I think. And his friends are a little bit more worldly. And so we would have conversations about it. And again, I don't feel that either one of them ever hide anything from me. So when I say like I go in their rooms, well, I clean their rooms. They do their own laundry, they do stuff, but I clean, and I have no problem ever going, looking in their nightstand, looking. And maybe that's not right, but I figure if they live with me until they're not living with me, then it's my, it's my
Definite
responsibility too as a parent, because it's very easy, I think, to just turn a blind eye and say like, oh, they're fine, they're great. I think I'm a little bit too much like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? That's how I am with them. And I can pick up on them. And I do feel that they do come to me when there is an issue, and they have. So.
Well, I'm sure I know for a fact there's a lot of parents out there that have children with substance abuse problems that maybe wished they had been a little more intrusive. I'd been a little bit more engaged. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty, but, I think a lot of mothers that I've sat across from, they've kind of given their children carte blanche because they're a boy, they're 16, they can do what they want, be home at 9. No, I'm coming home at 11, and then they don't follow through. And I know it's hard. It's a lot of work, but I think it's, I know there are parents I know that wish they had been a little more strict, I guess, or more attentive. And like you said, intrusive.
And I think that for me, how do I say it? I think that, I give them freedom, and they haven't shown me, reason to not trust them. But I do look for it, still. And I worry about their friends, but I ask questions. And my daughter comes to me with everything, even her friends' problems. Like even before, a close friend of hers had a major thing happen, and she came to me immediately and was like, I need your help with this. And, please don't say anything yet to her mother. And I said, okay, well, it's Friday. If she doesn't tell her by Sunday, then I have to, because I can't just not say anything. And so.
Michelle, I want to take a step back. Just knowing that you grew up in a family, because this is all great stuff. This is exactly what we talked to our daughter about, and all my kids. I have 5 kids, and all these kids, only three of them knew me when I was using, but they were very young. Yes. So you grew up in a household that was he was using at the time, your dad, and then he was clean at the time.
I would have never. I would have never known. I honestly, because I feel like even during that time, he still showed up for me.
Wow.
How he did it, I don't know. But every day he was consistent. He picked me up from school every day. We still did all the things that we did. So I didn't even know until my mom told me, and then I told her she was a liar. So that's not true.
She was too, believe me.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
So
she's a good mother.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm lucky, I guess, that it didn't. I think you kept it together really well, in my opinion. From because I felt like nothing really changed. I mean, I'm sure you think differently, Dad. That
absolutely.
But.
That's actually a good question. What was your feelings, Podfather?
Yeah, I did some shitty things. Sure. I can remember when Michelle was about 11 or 12. I had a really bad cocaine problem. I had a woman that was a bartender, and she was a friend of mine. And that's where I got one of my places to get coke from. And I remember her calling me one Sunday saying she was going away for a couple of days, and if I needed to get some product to come by. And I had Michelle, and so Michelle I had a nice Mercury Cougar, and I had her strapped in the front seat back then. And I pulled up, and Justine came out and, dropped it in my hand and the money. And I don't know if Michelle saw it. Probably not. I was trying to hide it. But yeah, a lot of guilt with that. All the times I spent on the couch. I can remember sending Michelle. I lived in a museum at one time, and Michelle and one of her friends, I gave her my credit card. She was 12 years old. I said, go over to Macy's, get what you want. And I gave her some cash. She came back with turtles, 2-box turtles, her and a friend, and, I was on the couch. I couldn't get off. I mean, if you have an addiction or booze or drugs, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But I was still aware enough and responsible enough to keep her in my, my sight. And I was there. Like I tried to be there as best I could.
Yeah. Yeah, but Podfather, if you kept going the way you were going, eventually, Michelle, you would have found out.
Oh,
You would have
absolutely.
seen life
Yeah.
differently, and
Yes.
and it would have gone horribly
Right.
wrong eventually. So
And you got to remember when I got sober. I mean, I was a police officer in a city, and local newspaper had fun with that. They went up 13 articles in 2 years. I mean, front page articles. I went and got help. I never got arrested. I never got caught doing anything. But I was honest about the addiction I had, and that was news. I was on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. I was on the front page of the Worcester newspaper, Lowell newspaper, Boston newspaper. It was a big news thing. So I always felt bad for my daughter Michelle, and then my son Chris was born as well in '86. So and I felt bad for Chris's mom too, and her family and my family, because it was very embarrassing. But I think Michelle was so active with her own life. I don't think she really paid much attention to it.
No,
Miss Meg, go ahead.
No, I'm just sort of thinking, like, I am thinking about sort of the position that my parents are in too, of like my dad being in recovery, my mom not having a drug problem, and then having me, and then have my drug problem, and then my mom, even before my addiction took shape, of my mom always saying, like, you have a history of this in your family, you got to be careful with this, and always explaining that to me. But I think that also heightened her fear and anxiety, which influenced how she sort of micromanaged me maybe as a mom. And I'm curious from your perspective if that influences you in any way, knowing that this is a history, and does that scare you?
Yes. Meaning me, Meg? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as a teenager, because I knew what he went through, and I was so involved with your recovery by like being at AA on the weekends, going to meetings, just sitting, but in high school, like I just, I never drank really, maybe a handful of times. But I never, try drugs really. I mean, I smoked pot probably twice. I think one of the best stories is I got a ride from a group of kids that I normally didn't hang out with, and we pull in the parking lot and everyone's smoking, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'm just going to do it. Right. Go into school, go to my first class. It's like history. We have a substitute, and I sit down, and the guy's like, "Hey, Michelle, how are you?" It was a friend of my dad's from AA, Jim Walmsley. He was a substitute teacher, and I was like, "Oh my God, how did that happen?" Right? So I never did that again before school.
And now, does it influence you though, knowing like your dad's history? Now, when you parent, are you sort of like hyper focused?
Yes.
Or are you able to be a little bit more relaxed?
And not only in my family, but also in their father's family, their dad's family. There's a lot, and so so we talk about it, and I'm very open with them about why, and why I don't drink a lot, or just, I guess that's
Yeah.
Michelle, do you understand addiction? A lot of people don't understand addiction. So growing up in that household, meaning that do you have a grasp on, what it could do, where it can go?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is, for me, especially at this point in my life, I know that when have felt overwhelmed in my adult life, I know, God, it would be easy to just like turn to something else, because I get it. I get it. I choose not to. And I was always, even in my 20s and early 30s, I never really drank, because I always felt like I had to be in control, like if something were to happen to my kids. So that's like my way of thinking, or my thought process. Right. Now that I'm older, I know that I can, go out to dinner, have a glass of wine. You know what I mean? I'm not, because I always want to be in control and be in a good place, for not just for me, but for my kids.
The blessing for me is that I have 3 children, and I don't worry about any of them currently, because I just don't. I mean, I never preached to them. I never sat them down. Michelle has been to meetings with me. I think Chris has been to meetings with me. Kara's never been. But Michelle was 12, 13 when I was getting sober, and I didn't have anyone to watch us sometimes. So she'd come to meetings with me and, asked a few questions, but always, she was always able, all my children were always able to entertain themselves, but I never preached to them. I never told them my stories of woe and everything, or you shouldn't do this. And if I remember coming home one night and Michelle had been drinking a beer and I smelled it and she denied it and I smelled it. And I mean, that's a teenager's job, is to deny. Of course it is, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't the fact that she had a beer, but I did worry, you know, I did worry. But as she got older, I could see that she just wasn't going to do that. And what a blessing, you know, because I have parents that have lost loved ones, especially children. I can't imagine, you know, and reading Maureen Kavanaugh's book, you know, oh my God, that book is got to be one of the best books I've ever read. And I'm a reader. I read a lot.
Yeah.
She has a way of putting that. I feel it. I feel every single incident that she's been through. And listen to Meg too, when you talk about your dad and what you've been through. Megan's such a smart girl. I mean, I'm glad you asked that question, Megan, and I hope you have some more because you.
Yeah. Well, Miss
So
Meg, I actually have a question for you about the situation with Mike that may pertain to you and your family too. So this is a disease. We believe it's a disease. So the household that Michelle grew up in, a sober household, and the disease concept and everything, how much do you think Mike's being clean and or Podfather's being clean and sober, that influence, and Michelle, this could be for you too, how much influence do you think it had on Michelle staying clean and taking that road and maybe smoking pot one time in her life or two times? What's, you know, you're the smart one, you're the Harvard girl, so what's your thoughts on that? And Michelle, I'd like to ask, you know, your thoughts on that also.
Well, it's interesting because Michelle, as you were speaking and you said sort of your urge to stay in control and that sort of being something that drove you away from substances. I don't know. I think when we ask the question of why some of us develop the addiction and why some of us don't, and if we use the disease model, like how do we make sense of it? I don't know. I think for me, being out of control was really comfortable, actually. And I think that was sort of the thing that allowed me to explore out of control. And sometimes I think, you know, when we're used to that and we recreate those patterns sort of from a psychological perspective, you know, it sounds crazy. Why would we do it if we saw the destruction that happened? But I think it's so much deeper than that. And so I think, I don't know if it's really about I don't know, Michelle, maybe for you, you saw your dad sort of get it together and that was a protective factor. And that was more maybe psychologically attractive to you than someone being out of control. Where in my experience, it was sort of, I thrive in chaos. I still do, you know, and my chaos is just more contained now. It's not as unhinged as it used to be, but I am in this field, you know,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think that for me, I knew that, you know, I'm so much like my dad and in so many ways that it was always in the back of my head. Like, you know, I knew that it could, you know, if I did the things that everyone I was around with did all the time, that it would be easy to fall into that because, you know, but I just didn't. I don't know why, but I just didn't. I mean, I joke about not even drinking at my own wedding, like not because I didn't want, you know, it was so many other things to do, you know what I mean? Talk to everyone and do this and not, you know, and I didn't, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's such a big question. You guys probably get the question all the time. It's like, how come the one kid I had, you know, developed an addiction and the other didn't? I think the other thing too, Ed, to go off of your point of the disease model. I mean, we know anybody that's interested in looking this up further, it's called epigenetics. It's how the environment influences your genes to either turn them on or turn them off. Yeah. So we could have the gene, if it even exists, of addiction, but if the environment doesn't tell that gene to turn on, it's not going to turn on. Yes. And so it really has so much to do with the environment actually influencing the gene. So it's totally a nature and nurture thing, because even the disease model, we develop diseases because the environment has told our genes to react in that way. So so many factors to consider. And I wish I had an answer to be able to say, here is why one person had the addiction and the other person didn't, you know. I think we all do.
In nature versus nurture. I mean, you know, when I was at Salem State, you know, this was very interesting to me. My grandfather, Albert Lefebvre, who I'm Michael Albert, my mother's father, he was a grave digger with no education. And he was a French Canadian and Micmac Indian. And he literally dug graves by hand. That was his job. And he was a raging alcoholic. And I have a picture of him in my office. And the reason I do is, first of all, we look alike. Now that I'm an old man, we look alike. It's amazing. But my mother didn't have a drinking problem, and she despised alcohol, and she despised anything that would even resemble somebody being drunk, because she grew up in a very abusive family. My grandfather was not a good man when he was drinking. However, I remember her talking about what a great man he was when he was sober, how he could look at a leaf in the fall and find beauty in it and start crying and, and emotional. And I'm an emotional guy. I mean, I like being confrontational. I mean, I can fight. I had to as a cop, but I can see something that touched my heart and really bring tears to it. But the gratitude of nature versus nature versus nurture. Like I said, I just raised my kids as best I could. Gave them what they wanted, but I never ever preached to them about booze or drugs. In a way that I was always worried about it, and I feel so fortunate as an older man now. Now I have grandchildren that are continuing, and it's just I'm in heaven. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Well, that and I think being, and like you said, Meg, there's some gene that gets turned on in the environment, no matter what it is. If we have an eating disorder, if we have a whatever it is, I think you're definitely right about that. I'm going to look up this epigenetics. Is that what it's called? Epigenetics?
Yeah,
that what you said?
epigenetics.
Okay.
And on the dictionary, I had someone on who was an epigeneticist. His name is David Krantz with the K. Krantz. He's the guy. Look him up. And also, if people are interested in that, you can send your saliva out to him and actually have him send it back to you and tell you sort of what your genetic sequence is and what you're vulnerable to and what you're not. It's really a field that's coming along. We talk about personalized medicine. I mean, that's pretty personalized.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing that again, like you said, somebody grows up in the household, the same household, and one gets the disease, one doesn't. And thank God, Michelle, you didn't get the disease. That's definitely a blessing in disguise.
I don't know if it's a control thing though with me, it's, so I always have to, I have my other things, like I clean all the time and
well, everybody has their little things,
Yeah.
But then there's the dry drunk, there's the everything else that goes into it. You're just normal. I mean, believe me, if you weren't normal, I would hear about it from your dad. Okay.
Yeah. and I think with my kids, like I don't want it to, sound like they're not like, ever around anything that they shouldn't be or have friends that do. They do. They're typical kids. I mean, they're not, so I mean, I'm just trying to be as, on them and talk to them as much as I can. And I, so every day I'm like, are they all right? And I ask them, are you okay? Do you need anything? But it is what it is. And I can't keep them in a bubble. So I have to
here's the thing, life doesn't come with a parenting manual, and which it should. Anybody can have kids, and anybody can raise anybody can try to raise kids, but it's the influence that you have, and Meg and you, Podfather, and we know Sweets' mom. We all were raised up in a great environment. So our children being sober, number one, and being raised in a good environment, that gives you, Michelle, as a sibling or as a spouse or a daughter, whatever it is, as a daughter, Sweets, edit all that out, please. But as a daughter, it gives you more of a chance to bring your children up right and have them go in the right path. And I think that's what sobriety gives us. Sobriety gives us a blessing that we can pass on, even though you're not in recovery. Your dad passed that on to you because you didn't grow up sitting at the coke dealer's house. You didn't grow up sitting in a fucking bar. You didn't grow up, all this stuff. You may not get it, but then you can fuck your kids up by how we're brought up, even though you may not even have this gene, the dysfunction kicks in. And so thank God we were all blessed in this room to get our sobriety and to pass it along to our children. Meg, you'll have that pleasure one day, possibly.
We'll see. I'll keep you posted.
Kids are overrated, Meg, right?
Meg, get a couple of good dogs.
Good. I got you.
Okay.
I'm in good shape.
Smart.
Hey, real quick, can I throw the podcast picture?
Please. I'm dying to hear who it is. You're going to get a drum roll for that?
This one's for you, Podfather.
Nice.
Codependency No More Podcast. Hosts Brian and Jennifer. In Codependency No More Podcast, Brian and Jennifer take you along their journey of codependency recovery. While having conversations with experts, other codependents, and each other, they will expose you to experience and points of view to help you in your own journey of codependency. You can find Codependency No More Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts from. So
sounds good.
And if you have any questions about us, if you want to, questions from Michelle, whatever, you can reach us at 617-379-1163, and that'll be our voicemail, and you can leave us a message, and we'll make sure we get information out to Michelle and Podfather and whoever. So
super. Hey, this has been a great podcast. Michelle, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for coming.
Thank you very much.
I'll tell you, I just want to say, it's as you get older, life. When I was younger, when I was in my 40s, which isn't young to some people, but I used to worry about going into my 60s and 70s. But when you have children, especially children like Michelle, age isn't even a factor in your life anymore. It's what your children are doing, what your grandchildren are doing, the people you love, the people around you, and that's what's important. And I'll tell you, I'm blessed. I'll take what I have a million times over anything that anyone could ever offer me. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, though.
Thank you for having
You're
me,
the best.
Dad. Thank you.
And Michelle, you have a wonderful dad there. I've known your dad for 10 plus years. And let me tell you, he treats me like a son sometimes. He really does.
Yep.
And I can imagine how he treats you. He treats me like gold, and I can imagine what a family member is. But your dad is a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he speaks very highly about all his kids, and I'm glad we were able to interview you. So
yeah, we're really lucky. I think he says he's the fortunate one, but I think that and everyone I'm close with are like, your dad's, everyone loves my relationship with him too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because it's not the normal. I shouldn't say that, but we're very close, and so it's good. Yeah.
I love it. I'm so happy you came on. I'm an only child, and my dad's my co-host, and I have a relationship with him. So
yes, you get
meeting
it.
you guys, I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, Friends in Recovery podcast. Thanks for everything.
Stay sober, everybody.
That concludes this episode of Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House for supporting those on the path to recovery and for keeping this valuable resource free for our Friends in Recovery community. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, email us at help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com. If you can't get enough of Mike the Podfather and Jersey Ed, you can catch them on Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast, available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube.